Welcome in. It is the maiden voyage of West Coast Bias, a podcast by West Coast football fans for West Coast football fans. I am Jason Scukanec of, I guess now 105.1 The Fan. Basically, I've been on the radio in Portland for 23 years, and we were always 1080 The Fan. But this week, we recently switched over to 105.1 The Fan. So how about this? I go on the radio in Portland, and I talk about sports. We're home of the Oregon Ducks. And joining me, I've known this guy for way too many years. He's filled in on the show with me a bunch. Basically, we just talk a lot of crap about one another when it comes to football picks. He's a super draft nerd, one of the smartest guys I know in the industry when it comes to football. Andrew Nemec, sports journalist, Prep Red Zone. What else we got? Sporting News. I mean, basically, this guy is the king of recruiting when it comes, and the NFL draft when it comes to West Coast. Andrew, thanks for kind of being a part of this. This was kind of your idea to kind of hatch this whole thing.
Yeah, we talked about it a couple of years ago that this was something we wanted to do. And if we're being totally candid, I think we both went, yeah, we both love to talk about football, but neither of us wants to produce anything because we don't know what we're doing. No. So I finally kind of bit the bullet and did like a couple hour tutorial on editing and how to launch a podcast and all that. So it's possible this gets recorded and no one ever sees it because I can't figure out how to hit publish. But
we're doing this radical thing that no one has ever done a podcast. I don't know if you know, but like this may be the first sports podcast ever done. So I mean, God, everyone else has one, so why shouldn't we, right?
Right. And my thing is, I've seen some of the people that do podcasts. If they can get their podcast up and running, I think between the two of us we can, although sometimes, we set a pretty low bar.
Well, it is true. Like I've been doing this I've never had a real job ever in my entire life. I went from failed NFL player to somewhat successful radio host. I guess I did work at a grocery store for about 6 months in between those gigs while I was applying at grad school, but I never had a real job. But the problem is I'm in radio, and yet I know nothing about how to do anything in radio other than to hit an on button. In fact, that's one of the things we talked about when we were doing this. I said, dude, you just need to set it up where tell me where to be, give me your microphone, tell me where the on button is, and I can do that. But if you're asking me for any sort of details, like if the apocalypse happened and I had to like recreate a radio, like a station, they'd be like, whoa, this guy's been doing it for 20 plus years. Wrong. I am not the guy. Shocking. Nothing about this beard says that this guy is tech savvy. It's just, it's not my wheelhouse.
Have you seen the bit from the comedian who says, if I went back in time, I don't know if I could prove I really am from the future, because he'd say something like, we have laptops. And they're like, what is that? And it's like, you can type things into them and there's moving pictures on them. And they go, how does that work? And he's like, I don't know. You know, it's like all the different things. Like we have the internet. What's the internet? Information's on it quickly.
Yeah, exactly. You're basically at that point, you're a sci-fi writer, but you need some sort of smart person to put that all together. But we wanted to do this. Again, we're both huge NFL college football fans, and the whole East Coast bias thing is real. I mean, you look at it, the majority of the people in the country where the media is set up, it's usually East Coast, well, East and South, right? So in the NFL, we know what drives the needle, whether that's the East Coast markets down into Texas, college football, Big Ten, SEC, and then out here on the West, we kind of feel like it just gets ignored. I mean, even when USC back in the day was dominating college football, there was this idea of like, well, USC's fine because, they kick Auburn's ass, but then they tussle everyone else's hair and be like, oh, it's cute. Or when the Rams win a Super Bowl, the Seahawks win a Super Bowl, we used to have a hard time getting credit. For whatever reason, they think like if you're the Rockies West, that somehow we don't know how to play tough, hard-nosed football, or with like the Ducks, for instance, it's a gimmicky program. Oh yeah, you guys win, but it's gimmicky. You can't do it when it matters. You can't do it against the big rugged SEC, and that's just. And so we wanted to do maybe a podcast for people that actually enjoy West Coast football and are not going to buy into that line of thinking that we can't play real football out here on the West Coast.
Well, I think it even got tougher to follow because the rest of college football used the Pac-12, the preeminent conference on the West Coast, as a buffet line. We'll take some of this. We'll take some of this green and yellow. We'll take some of this purple, and so now it's fractured all over the place. And yet there's these deep-rooted fandoms that are regional, that are based on geography. with the Oregon Ducks and Oregon State Beavers and the Huskies and the Cougars. And then, you look at the NFL and you talk about the Seahawks and the 49ers and their history, especially in the last 20 years, just two incredible NFL franchises. The Niners go back obviously even further than that in terms of their dominance and being great. But we just want to highlight that. And I think it gets lost in the shuffle too often with Bronny James, or I think Cooper Flagg is going to be a thing now that we're just buried under, that's going to make it tougher to find out what the heck's going on. It's not going to lead. The West Coast often doesn't lead ESPN. It doesn't lead Fox Sports. It's not the preeminent discussion point. And I think there's a place for it and a place to do it with some depth and really get into these teams and talk about them in more than that 3-minute hit on TV. Let's get into these teams and talk about them. Let's really have, hopefully, an elevated conversation about the teams that we all love on the West Coast.
Well, and I mean, we're doing this right now in the shadow of Big Ten Media Day. And, obviously, we covered the Ducks out here at West. It is the predominant gorilla in the room right now on in the West, which is funny to say because the Washington Huskies were playing in a national title a couple years ago, but obviously that fell off a little bit. And USC is still a name. We'll get into that maybe a little bit. Can USC actually get back to where they're at? But I think it's safe to assume it, and people may not like to hear it, but the big brother in the room right now in West Coast is the Oregon Ducks. I know Washington doesn't want to hear it. USC doesn't want to hear it. And you may hold up that, the national title game, but is that a one-off thing? Was that a Caleb DeBoer one-off? But when you look at the last 20 plus years, ever since the USC dynasty ended, the rise of the Oregon Ducks, that is the program of record out West.
Oh, no doubt. And you look at the recruiting results they've followed. I think it's funny. People keep saying, Oregon wins the offseason every year, but where are they come national championship time? I tend to think once you get to the game, it's almost a coin flip. Things have to go your way. And when you're that close to the top of the mountain, things just kind of have to bounce your way. Yeah. And it's a Michael Dyer ankle, was he down? It's little things like that make all the difference in the world in whether or not you get to the top of the mountain. Also, coaching changes tend to throw things and tend to, reset a program. Washington just experienced that when Kalen DeBoer left for Jed Fish. And I think Washington hired Fish hoping that he'd bring a preseason top 10 team out of Arizona with him. And he didn't really. He didn't have that level of success bringing them. Oregon, in their various iterations of new coaches with Helfrich and Taggart and Cristobal and Lanning, they actually haven't had a 4-year run yet. This will be, I believe, year 4 for Lanning is a full recruiting cycle. It's actually 5 seasons, but it's 4 years of full recruitment that Oregon's gone through without a coaching change. Well, we all know what happens when there's a coaching change. So for all this chatter about how come Oregon hasn't, for all this recruiting they're doing, well, they've unfortunately had a reset before any one cycle went all the way through. And even at that, you look at what happened last year with Oregon. They finished the regular season number 1. They had back-to-back years now where they've set a record for most players drafted in the NFL. They've had 3 first-round picks in the last 2 years. So you go, wow, that's a lot to rebuild from. We just saw Washington have to rebuild, and it was a little bit of a struggle after making the national title game. They must be in a little bit of trouble. Oh, nope. They're minus 300 in Vegas to make the college football playoff. People are talking about their new quarterback as a dark horse Heisman Trophy candidate. People have already predicted he's a Heisman finalist. And when you look at preseason rankings of the top units in college football, whether it be quarterback, running back, offensive line receiver on the defensive side of the ball, I think 6 of Oregon's position groups are considered top 10 units in the country. So where's the recruiting? Where's the getting to the top of the mountain? Well, they're in it every year, and it's going to come down to that fraction of an inch for them. And obviously, Oregon fans are hoping they can finally make that a one, not in terms of the logo, but in terms of national titles.
Yeah, Big Ten Media Day actually had Oregon 3rd in the Big Ten. But, I mean, Penn State, who's one of the odds-on favorites, Penn State was number 1. Penn State would probably be the team in the Big Ten that has the least question marks. And mainly they have Drew Aller coming back. So when you look at Ohio State, who finished 2nd, and then Oregon, who finished 3rd in the poll, I think a lot of that just comes down to Ohio State and Oregon both have quarterbacks that we haven't seen. I guess a little bit in Dante Moore in Oregon, but two quarterbacks that aren't tested, whereas you've got a guy in Drew Aller that's kind of been through the fire a little bit, and Penn State having gone to the playoff last year and then fallen short. So I think maybe that's where some of that comes with Penn State getting the love and then Ohio State and Oregon. But I think when you look at Penn State, you look at Ohio State, and you look at Oregon, take your pick. I mean, those are the three teams in the Big Ten, and I think you can probably do this with most conferences. You take your top two or three teams, and that is, quote, your contenders, at least going into the season, because we all know from Arizona State to BYU, to Tennessee last year, you never know what can happen. But when you're looking at the preseason stuff, I think most people feel pretty confident that you can take two or three teams and say, at least on paper, that is going to be the powerhouse teams. And for the most part, it's going to be the same handful of programs each year in the conference.
Yeah, and I hope Oregon fan doesn't take being a preseason third as a shot.
Oh, they will. Dan Lanning right now is doing the no one believes in us, no one respects us. That team out west, there's an inflatable duck heading somewhere. Trust me, I love Dan Lanning. I do, but one of my pet peeves is the no one believes in us crap. LeBron James does it. LeBron James does it. I'm just a kid from Akron. You have chosen one tattooed on your back and you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated. So, dude, Oregon still to this day plays the little engine that could, and it's adorable. You've been one of the most successful programs for the last 30 years. You played for 2 national championships. You're a top 5 or 6 recruiter. You have one of the most robust NIL packages. You have the best facilities arguably in the country, and we're still doing the little engine that could. But I guarantee you right now, Dan Lanning is cooking up a Louis third in the polls. No one believes in us.
I just think people need to understand that the Big Ten and the SEC are mega conferences, and they're not 10-team conferences. They're gigantic. If you're picked in the top 3 in the Big Ten or the SEC, they're saying you are not the favorite to win a national title, but you are very much in the mix. To put it in perspective, I think Illinois and Indiana are 2 kind of sleeper teams in the Big Ten. I think both of them are going to be good. I think people think Indiana's a fluke. They're not.
I think Illinois, I think they finished 4th in that poll, by the way.
4th or 5th, yeah. But, I mean, those teams are even plus 400, plus 500 to make the playoff. So, you say 25% shot or 20% shot for an Indiana. You're saying it's basically a slam dunk that Oregon's in the college football playoff at a minus 300. This isn't the Pac-12. If you got picked, 3rd in the Pac-12 8 years ago, that meant you were probably going to lose 3 or 4 games. What this means in the Big Ten is that your over-under win total is in the double digits. Yeah. So third is not a slight, especially when I think the 2 best college football players in America play for Ohio State. Caleb Downs at safety, Jeremiah Smith at wide receiver. Those are probably the top 2 just pure football players. I know, we talk about position value or whatever at safety, but those are the top 2 football players in all of college football. And Ohio State has one on each side of the ball. And we talked about Penn State. Penn State has Drew Aller. Penn State is probably the most veteran team. Yes, they lose Abdul Carter, probably the best edge rusher in all of college football last year. They lose Tyler Warren, the most versatile tight end in college football. We can debate whether he was the best, but certainly the most versatile. Those are key pieces, but they return a ton, 2 of the best running backs in the country. And so, okay, Oregon's right up against those 2 programs. That's a big compliment with some of the turnover that they're experiencing. Again, back-to-back years with a program record, most players drafted in the NFL. You do that once. I mean, we saw what happened with Washington when they did that once. You fall back down a little bit. Or traditionally, you do. Look at Michigan. Michigan won that national title, lost a ton of talent.
TCU, then a couple years ago. Yeah.
So the fact that Oregon set a record, went undefeated last year, even losing a record amount of NFL talent for their program, undefeated, number 1, entering the college football playoff. They set a new record this year for most NFL talent. So stacking record on record, and still we're going, they're better than a coin flip by far to make the college. I mean, they're getting a tremendous amount of respect. Third is not a slight. It's not.
Get into the dance, right? I mean, honestly, at this point in the college football playoff, I think it becomes much like the NFL. In the NFL, I mean, you get one bye, right? But how many times in the NFL do we see it? Just you make the postseason, you see what happens, right? If you get into the dance, and Ohio State proved that. Ohio State loses to Oregon, right? They lose to Michigan, kind of waltz backwards into the college football playoff with this, do we need to fire Ryan Day sort of madness? Well, and all Ohio did was take the number one team in the country that had beat them earlier in the year, and they stomped a mud hole in them. So, honestly, this first 5 weeks of the season, whether it's Ohio State, whether it's Oregon, both any team breaking in new quarterbacks, regardless of what happens in the first handful of weeks, dude, if you get to the point where you win 10 games and you're a 2-loss team and you're one of these teams like Oregon, you're going to be in the dance. And when you get there, then you're dangerous. So this whole, win the Big Ten. I mean, obviously the goal is to win your conference every year, whether that's Washington, whether that's Oregon, USC, whatever. I guess if you're the Pac-2, you're not winning a conference this year. Sorry, Oregon State.
They play each other twice, so that would be a big deal to win the title. That would mean we'll get into
that, because that's the strangest thing in the world. I mean, I honestly feel so bad for Oregon State and Washington State, but
I do as well.
Win your conference is great, but we learned it last year. Does anyone care that Ohio State didn't win the Big Ten? Oh, Michigan, great. I'm sure you get to hold that up, or Oregon can hold them up. You beat them in the regular season. One team's the national champion and one team's not. So don't buy into this, the respect thing or having to win the Big Ten. It's a new world of college football. And to me, it's just get into the dance. You get into the dance and you're going to be just fine. So
let's pivot. Real quick. I was asked after that loss to Michigan, I did a radio segment and people were asking me about different recruiting things and different coaching things. And a question was, who do you like as the top candidate to replace Ryan Day? And I said, I didn't know what to do. I said, I don't mean to be rude. I have no way to answer that question. They could still win the national title. He's like, I don't know what to do with that question. And it kind of paused. It kind of stalled out my interview a little bit. But I just said, I can't even begin to fathom what happens here, because they could still win and then they did. Yeah. And that question now kind of seems
it's absurd. Like if Dan Lanning doesn't win a national title in 3 years, are we going to be sitting here being like, whoa, what do we do with Dan Lanning? It's just, this isn't, you look at teams that win national titles in college football, there's not many of them. It's really, really hard to do. I mean, James Franklin has this going on at Penn State right now. So this is their best time, right? To supposedly win a national title. So if we don't win it this year, if let's say you get to the national title and you fall short, you lose to Alabama, you lose to Texas or whatever. Now do we fire James Franklin? It's just the whole thing. The whole thing is absurd. It can take a lifetime to win a national title. From Bobby Bowden to a lot of these great coaches, dude, they don't have 6 national titles. I think we're living in this weird world of Nick Saban or Urban Meyer, where these guys like stacked multiple titles on top of each other in a short period of time. But I'm telling you, go back and look at some of the great coaches and how many national titles they won over like a 30-year career. It's 1, it's 2. So we get these guys that have been in a program for 5-6 years, maybe 7 years, and you're like, well, you never won one. And you're like, why don't you give it some time?
My favorite kind of random national title stat, where it's like, how random can it really be, right? Like just it has to be the bounce of the ball and everything. Tennessee had Peyton Manning. They didn't win a national title. No. Peyton Manning leaves Tennessee, goes to the NFL draft.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
They win the next year with
T. Martin.
T. Martin.
The
drop off at quarterback all time is historic. You go from Peyton Manning, one of the best quarterbacks to ever exist on this planet, to T. Martin. And he's a great coach and whatever, but he's not Peyton Manning as a quarterback. No. And you win the national title. Again, everything has to align. The maturity of your program at the right time has to come together. Even if you have a Peyton Manning, anything can happen when it comes to, like you said, just getting in the dance and seeing what happens.
So we're going to try to do something every episode. At least for the kind of the get-go here where we get into the preseason, because once you get into the season, it's easy. We'll talk about games, we'll talk about results, we'll do a look ahead. We're going to try to do these twice a week. So we'll try to do like Monday, Friday. Monday, we'll do a recap of what happened, obviously over the weekend. And then Friday, we'll do a look ahead. And then, we'll kind of play with it. Maybe something big happens on a Sunday in the NFL. And we are going to do NFL and college. This is going to be West Coast bias. And so we're going to try to deal with everything related to West Coast football. And then obviously, as we have conversations, especially without a lot of games, we're popping into the Big Ten here in Penn State and Ohio State, because that obviously involves USC, Oregon, Washington in the Big Ten. But we are going to try to focus on West Coast football. So what we decided to do in these first couple episodes is we're going to do The three biggest programs in the Northwest. Here we're going to do Oregon, we'll do Washington, we'll even throw in some Beavs, and then we'll do the two big NFL kind of West Coast teams here that especially up where we're at Pacific Northwest. We're going to do the Seahawks and we're going to do the Niners. So we'll talk a little offense. So I want to go through and we'll start in college because we're having a little college conversation right now, but we'll go through the three schools and we're going to touch upon offense. So, and then on Friday, we'll do the inverse of this and we'll do the defensive side of the ball. But let's talk about offense. We'll go through college first. So we'll start in Oregon because we've been talking about the Ducks, and then we'll do the Doggies and we'll do the Beavs and we'll switch over to the NFL. So we're having a conversation about Oregon. Let's stick with the Ducks. So I want to ask you, because I know what mine is. So if we're going to go strengths, we're talking strengths and then maybe a question mark. I don't know if weakness, if you want to call it that, because I think so many times, at least in college football, I don't even know if you can say a weakness. It's just unproven because there's so much roster turnover, especially in the transfer portal. So when we look at Oregon's offense, which, Oregon has been built on. They've played good defense. They've had good defensive players that have rolled through here. In fact, I think when they've had their special seasons, it's usually when the defense elevates to become on par with the offense. But this is an offensive known team. And I think for me, this is a little weird because when I look at the strength of this team, and I know you lost a couple guys to the NFL and it was a very good one last year. To me, when I look at the strength of this team coming back, I don't know about you, I think the group I feel best about is the offensive line, even with three new starters.
Yeah, the offensive line is the strength. You bring in Isaiah World from Nevada. You bring in Alex Harkey from Texas State. You bring in Emmanuel Pregnon from USC. Those are three of the best players along the offensive line that were in the portal.
Two of them could be first-round picks. I mean, World is supposed to be, if we're to believe the hype, he's supposed to be a top 15 pick.
Yeah, it's possible. It's certainly possible. So when you've got those guys and then you've got your returners, that offensive line looks really special. And we could have really easily, by the way, and we'll talk about it when we talk about injuries a little bit, we could have very easily seen offensive line, if there were no injuries this offseason, as the question mark, as the weakness. You'd say, man, they don't have two tackles. They're missing a stud interior lineman, at one of the guard spots. Instead, Dan Lanning goes to the portal, and speaking to their recruiting prowess, probably if you were to blend high school talent, because they got the number one average rating per commit in the country among the high school guys, and then they got what is very likely the number one transfer portal class in the country, they probably have the most incoming talent of anyone in America, ahead of the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States. It's a great haul. And I think it starts with what they got at safety in Dylan Thieneman. And then, of course, these three offensive linemen who I think are absolute studs. I like the running back group. To me, that almost goes hand in hand. You get a Mekhi Hughes out of Tulane. He's not a home run hitter, but he's just a tough, physical runner who sees, he hits the right hole, who's going to fall forward. He's going to get the yards required. And then Noah Whittington as a 1-2 tandem. And that doesn't even account for some of the guys that have come in and spelled things late in games and done a nice job, who've shown flashes. I just think the run game in general with Mekhi Hughes and that stellar offensive line is almost certainly the strength of that team. Throw in that Kenyon Sadiq can be a moving blocker for you. And we'll talk about him as well a little later, but that has to be the strength, right? I mean, There's some serious questions at some of the other spots.
Well, I look at it, and this is why the transfer portal is interesting, because you're right that without the transfer portal, I think this would be the weakest part of the team. But you bring in arguably the two biggest gets on the offensive line that were available in the transfer portal, and then Pregnon the out of USC to play in the interior. I mean, you're talking about three guys that would probably play on most teams across the country.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Most people are having to replace, 2 or 3 starters along the offensive line most years between graduation and between, people leaving to go into the transfer portals. And the other one that I think with Oregon, because I'm always one of those guys I'm an old lineman, my little BYU helmet up there in the corner. I'm an old fart, but I played O-line, and I was a big believer in O-line continuity, right? Like, my senior year, we ended up being, for most of the year, a top 10 team in the country. And then the last game, Hawaii hung 72 on us and ended our BCS busting dreams.
Was that a Timmy Chang team?
No, that was a Nick Rolovich. We got COVID. That was the Nick Rolovich COVID cast.
Who was your quarterback?
Brandon Dolman.
Okay. Who was their quarterback when you give up 72?
That was Nick Rolovich. That was Nick Rolovich.
Oh, Rolovich was the quarterback.
Rolovich was the quarterback.
Holy cow.
Dude, like I got kind of
got Roloed.
I got Roloed. And they had I don't know, you may know this because you're a Niner guy, so maybe you got a little Bronco fever into you, but Ashley Lilly. We made Ashley Lilly a lot of money. He was a first-round pick out of Hawaii.
Gross.
And I ended up playing with him in Denver, and he was kind of a bust. In fact, Rolovich and Ashley Lee.
Did you say both, kind of? You don't have to say kind of.
He's a nice guy. I like Ashley.
Okay, fair enough.
We both ended up. All three of us ended up in Denver. That 2 years down the road. Just 1 year down the road. We all ended up in the Broncos together. And so they used to give me a ton of crap, and I used to give Ashley Lee a ton of crap. I'm like, dude, you owe us money. Because we made you a first-round pick. Yeah, it's something ridiculous. They hung 72 on us, and I think we were like 10th in the country, and they were talking about having us be the first BCS buster, going to the Fiesta Bowl instead of Boise State. Boise State, Oklahoma. That could have been us. And they just dropped the house on us. It was not pretty at all. I think we scored 40 something in that game and still lost by 30.
Yeah. Those are always better. Honestly, those losses are better than the 41-0.
Yeah.
Because at least it's still bad, but at least you have at least one side of the ball is doing their job.
Dude, it was an unmitigated disaster. We were sniffing our own farts, thinking we were great. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna go play Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl, and I think we were 12-0 going into Hawaii. Got one extra game. I blame it on 9/11. That was the 9/11 season. That was 9/11.
You do that all the time. You just constantly blaming stuff on 9/11.
Blaming on 9/11. But I digress. I was a continuity guy because that group of O-linemen, we had played together for 3 years, and then it kind of peaked. And so I still think to this day, if you can, building an O-line, get 4 or 5 guys that can play multiple years together, I still think that is the best way to go about building an offensive line. But in today's world, it's harder and harder to do. You can't keep O-lines together. No. It doesn't happen. There's too many holes to fill, and there's too many guys that would go elsewhere. I mean, that team that I had, 2 or 3 of us would have been picked off, right? My junior year, I make an all-conference team. I'm not staying at BYU. Someone comes and is like, well, you could play at crappy BYU. And I don't mean to say crappy BYU, but you could play it at BYU, or here's, $500,000. And do you want to come play at Oregon or Ohio State? And I'm gone. So I've kind of gotten rid of the continuity thing. I think some of that is overblown. And guys now I think are just used to kind of having this plug and play mentality. And this is where I'll give Oregon the most credit. I don't know a team that has hit on more transfer portal kids than Oregon. I mean, the transfer portal tends to be kind of hit and miss, right? You get a lot of people that pay a lot of money and it never works out. When you look at Oregon in the transfer portal, when they grab a kid, for the most part, it has been a home run. I mean, you look at the vast majority of at least big name portal kids that they've brought in, they've all been successful for the most part, and not just successful, but here they come, not missing a beat. And so when I look at these 3 that they're bringing in, so both your tackles and your starting left guard are going to be portal kids. And normally that would make me a little hesitant, but I kind of feel like right now with Oregon, I give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I mean, I think that's a reasonable take, especially given how proven these guys are. I mean, I think there's 2 ways to go about it. And Oregon's had the most success in the portal when they've kind of taken the proven guy. And
they're all seniors, by the way. All 3 of these O-linemen that are going to come in and play, they're all seniors.
Right. Christian Gonzalez showed way more than flashes when he was at Colorado. He looked like he was going to step up. Derek Harmon was really good. He was an all-conference guy at Michigan State. Now, he wasn't first-team all-conference, but he was going to come in a year after being an all-conference guy. Well, he comes in and hits the ground running. Tez Johnson had one of the best freshman seasons in the history of college football. He was a little bit of a question in the sense that could he elevate?
Yeah, size-wise and all that.
Size-wise, and would he be able to handle the jump up from Troy? And he was phenomenal. So some of their hits are literally taking guys that are a little more proven. Where they've missed, or at least where there's been a perception of some missing, and I hate to disparage an injured player, but Evan Stewart, you look at and say, okay, 5-star recruit, kind of a question, wasn't great early in his career. He's going to go to Oregon and finally realize his 5-star potential. Well, Last year, he played in 13 games. He didn't have a catch in the Big Ten title game, and he only had 4 games where he had more than 30 yards receiving. So he was boom bust. He had, 4 90-plus yard receiving games. Then he had a whole lot where you just didn't realize he was even on the field. So when they've gotten that proven guy, I think this staff has done a remarkable job of watching film, seeing who's in the portal, and going, we need a fit that does this. Who is the best at this? Let's go get that guy. And they've done it. And so they've put their transfers that are proven, that have the film, in a spot to say, you're going to be this for us. And we know you can do it. And we're not going to ask you to do much more than, again, this, that you were really good at your previous spot. And because they've done that, they've been wildly successful, far more, I think, successful than most teams. And I think that speaks to the intelligence of this staff, particularly, in my opinion, on the defensive side of the ball.
So we'll get to the defense on Friday, but focus on offense. So we both really like the run game. I think we can agree that's going to be the strength. Good backs, good old line, very talented tight end. So if we're going to go question mark, and by the way, I think there's a question mark of both of these, but I'll ask you because we got to move on. We'll get to the Dogs, we'll get to the Bees, and we still got NFL stuff to get into. And I want to give you plenty of time to bitch and moan about the San Francisco 49ers because that's going to happen.
No complaining here, man. I'm excited.
Biggest question mark for this Duck team. Are we going quarterback or are we going receiver? Because I think both of those, I think you can make a case that if there is going to be a shortcoming and this team doesn't get where they want to go, it's outside or it's the guy taking the snap.
Yeah, I think it's pretty undeniably the wide receiver group. I think you're hearing enough buzz about Dante Moore. I have some sources within the program. Obviously, folks know that I talked to a number of the kids who, went and going to Oregon. That's been my job for a lot of years, is the recruiting side. There is a belief that when it comes to diagnosing a defense and processing and making the right throw, making the right read, seeing the defense, getting it to the right receiver, that Dante Moore is further ahead than Dylan Gabriel was last year already. Now, that's a really good sign. That's a processing thing, which usually comes later. I think there's still some accuracy concerns potentially, or at least that's the unknown. But what I'm hearing is his ability to process and his ability to read a defense is really elevated, that Dante Moore has really impressed in that way. That's a really good sign. I also, frankly, like the way Austin Novosad spins it. Son of a coach, he can really spin a football. And I don't think he's a bad second option. Where I worry is that receiving core. And it's not that they're not proven. It's not that they're not talented. It's that, I guess I shouldn't say it's not that they're not proven. It's not that they're not talented. They're talented. I'm not sure how proven they are. You lose Evan Stewart, who was a very hit or miss guy. And I know Oregon fan is already kind of saying, man, Evan Stewart got hurt and that's so brutal. Evan Stewart either showed up last year or didn't. He had huge games, and we all remember his huge games. Denzel Burke, the Ohio State corner, certainly remembers Evan Stewart because he cost him millions of dollars. It's the reverse Ashley Lilly situation there that you pointed out from earlier. Evan Stewart was not necessarily a with a bullet wide receiver one. Other than that, you've got Kyler Casper, who, he's long, he's athletic. He hasn't been a consistent guy. You've got Gary Bryant Jr. hurt last year. He's a veteran. You'd expect him to potentially step up. Jeremiah McClellan, good receiver. You like him. Ohio State really wanted him even when he was a 3-star recruit. Now, he obviously elevated to the point that he became a top 100 guy by signing day. But he had a lot of buzz. And some of those schools that get whoever they want, the LSUs, the Ohio States, they really wanted Jeremiah McClellan. So, he flashed a little bit last year. I think he had a pretty big fumble on a punt return that people remember, but I think he's got potential. They bring in Malik Benson, again, kind of the Evan Stewart guy, who's highly rated recruit. He's bounced around. I think he was at Alabama and Florida State. He's got potential to be a vertical threat. You've got Justice Lowe, Jerion Dickey, Dylan Gresham. That's a whole lot of names that you go, yeah, I remember that guy when he signed. He's a 4-star recruit. Who's your wide receiver one? And I'm leaving one guy out intentionally, very much intentionally.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going with this.
DeCorian Moore, 5-star recruit.
Elephant in the room.
The second highest rated prospect in the history of the program. If, and this is a massive if, by the way, like this is an all-time historic if he can be somewhere between Jeremiah Smith, who no one should be held to that standard. That's insane. He's a generational talent.
Yeah.
And Ryan Williams, who was at Alabama last year, he was the other highly rated 5-star.
Which, by the way, halfway through the season, we thought Ryan Williams was the best freshman and the best receiver we've ever seen. Like, both of those guys were special last year.
If he's along that lineage and he's an 800-yard, 6-7 touchdown guy, that's really valuable. I mean, that's incredible. If he's not, I don't know where they go other than saying we've got 8 or 9 receivers. They're all going to have 300 or 400 yards. And when you're unproven at wide receiver and you're unproven at quarterback and you have a running back who's not a home run guy, he's more of a, get 5 to 7 every carry kind of guy. I worry about you being able to stretch the field vertically. Yeah. So that's my big concern. I know Kenyon Sadiq's incredible at tight end. He's so versatile. You can play him at wide receiver. But we saw maybe the very best version of a versatile tight end last year for Penn State in Tyler Warren, who was a first-round pick. Kenyon Sadiq could be close to that good. He really could. He's special. No one was going to call Penn State's offense incredibly explosive.
No.
And so if the ceiling is, and remember, Drew Aller had a playoff game where he didn't complete a pass to his wide receivers.
Yep.
And it wasn't Drew Aller's fault. He just threw to Tyler Warren and his running backs. If Oregon doesn't have the wide receiver depth, if they can't stretch things vertically, we may be looking at a very Penn State-ish year for Oregon this year in the sense that they're not super explosive. They play really good defense. They put up enough points to win games, and that's the recipe. I think it's good enough to make the college football playoff, but unless those receivers really develop, I'm not sure it's going to be good enough to get to the top of the mountain.
Okay. Let's switch gears. Let's head up the old I-5 corridor to old Montlake there, and let's talk some doggies here. So Washington comes off arguably not arguably, the best year in their program since winning a national championship. Kalen DeBoer and
co-national
champions.
We're gonna lose all our Oregon listeners calling them a national. They were it was a great season.
Well, some people thought they should have been national champions in 1984, but that went to another team, maybe from Provo, Utah.
Wow,
BYU.
You just suck it there.
Suck it, doggies. No, I mean, phenomenal. That team was ridiculous. I will go to my grave saying that phantom holding call. That national title game against Michigan was the better team. But remember, they had that thing, I think it was down to like 10 points. And Penix throws the deep fade ball down and would have had him inside like the 20 going in there. And there was a phantom holding call, and it completely changed the momentum of the game. That being said, look, Washington lost to a better Michigan team, but that Washington team was ridiculous. And so it was like, oh my gosh, here we go. We've got this great rivalry now, Oregon, Washington, and we're back on top, and here it comes. And then DeBoer pulls the rug out. The roster gets absolutely gutted through the NFL draft. You can't replace 3 NFL receivers. You can't place this generational quarterback. You're left scrambling. You bring in Fish, and does he stabilize it? And let's say last year was not ideal for the Washington Huskies. I think 6 losses, although some of those, no reason to lose to Washington State, no reason to lose to Rutgers. Some of those losses were just bad, though. I mean, even the Michigan game, coming off of that, you thought maybe there was some positive momentum, and then Iowa just absolutely drubs you 40-16. So I think when you look at Washington, this almost has to be a clean slate. You flush last year and you say, okay, where does Jedd Fisch go in year 2? Because remember, down in Arizona, he got a 4-win bump from year 1 to year 2. So when we look at Washington, does Jedd Fisch and the Huskies get that 4-game bump in year 2? Because it does look on paper that Washington seems to be in a better spot than where they were last year when they were really scrambling to try to fill the DeBoer hole.
Yeah, and if we're talking about weakness with this offense, it's got to be the offensive line. And
it's terrible last year too.
They gave up the most sacks in the Big Ten, and again, that's not a Big Ten with 10 teams. There's a bunch of teams in that conference. If you're bottom of the Big Ten in sacks allowed, that's a huge problem. And I know they bring in Kansas State transfer Carver Willis. I think they have more holes than that. I think this group is a real question. If they gel, I like a lot of the pieces. And when we talk about strengths, I think Damon Williams Jr., he was a star at Basha High School. He commits to Arizona. He leaves Arizona within like a week to go with Jedd Fisch to Washington. I think he's phenomenal. I think we could be talking about I don't want to call him Kyler Murray, but because Kyler had the best high school seasons in the history of Texas and maybe the entire country, and then became what he became. But I think Damon Williams could be kind of the B- version of that, a really good player, a guy who's an all conference player in time. I really like him. I mean, I could not speak more highly about him. You're hearing the buzz now. I felt this way last year. You're hearing the buzz now nationally that like, hey, this Williams kid can really play. He was great at the Manning Passing Academy. I think he won an accuracy drill, which for a diminutive quarterback is key and huge. Will he have time to throw? He tends to hold on to the ball a little too long. There's kind of that Caleb Williams-itis with him where he hangs on to it too long. If he's a quarterback who hangs on to the ball too long, takes a little bit longer to process than, maybe more experienced quarterbacks, and the O-line has problems and you're small, isn't there a world where he gets sacked a whole bunch, has to worry about injuries, and this thing snowballs? Again, we're talking about the question mark or the biggest weakness. That's where I lean. If we're talking strength, isn't it the weapons? I mean, you look at Jonah Coleman. I think Jonah Coleman's one of the top 6-7 running backs in America.
Despite playing behind that crappy old line, he still ran for 1,000 yards. And I think I'd have to look it up, but I think he had 13, 14 touchdowns. So
he very good.
He was a bright spot on that team last year without much of a dynamic offense to speak of. And so that should be something they can lean on this year.
No doubt. And you lose 3 NFL wide receivers and you go, well, that's a huge problem. Well, Denzel Boston just steps up and immediately has the type of season that could potentially make him a first-team all-conference Big Ten guy this year, building off of a last year breakout year. And it really more than a breakout. He was a standout last year. They've got some depth at tight end. I like the weapons. I like Damon Williams Jr. I think he could be truly, truly special. When we talk about offense at Washington, it's going to come down to the offensive line because I think all the pieces are there. Am I overstating how important that offensive line is when you look at the rest of the pieces?
No, it has to be. By the way, Coleman last year, despite playing behind a sieve of an offensive line without much of a passing attack, ran for 1,000 yards, 5.5 yards a carry, and had 10 touchdowns. So, like, if you even get competent O-line play, I think Washington will get a 3 or 4 win bump. And I know a lot of this, I mean, with Williams, I mean, he was a spot player. Will Rogers was the quarterback last year, but I think people are looking at the bowl game, which again, this goes back to, it can be scary. He had that dominant performance against Louisville in the bowl game, ended up coming short, but he threw for 300 and something yards, 4 touchdowns, had the 1 pick. So I think when you look at that, you love your weapons on the outside. Boston is going to be an NFL player. You have one of the better backs, I think, in all of the country, and you've got this young dynamic quarterback that you think if you look at the end of the year, you think he's able to pop. It really does come down to and with a quarterback that can move around like that, I don't know if you need elite O-line play. You need competent O-line play.
I think that's
because Coleman has proven that he can run with even bad O-line play. And when you got a guy that can move around, like you said, a Kyler Murray light, you would think that just kind of playing some of that Johnny Manziel background or backyard football, you should be able to get by with competent O-line play. And so I just think that's the key to everything at UW. And the schedule isn't that bad. I mean, you start out with Colorado State, UC Davis, and Washington State. That should be 3-0. They really should.
They have to be 3-0. Let's call a spade a spade. They have to be 3-0. If you in that stretch run losing the Apple Cup again to a Washington State team that's pretty depleted, that's a strike against you. And you lose to Washington State, and some of those games that you play in Big Ten play that you go from, they should win those. You suddenly go, those might be lost. They have to be 3-0 to start.
Yeah, I look at Colorado State, UC Davis, Washington State, Maryland, Rutgers. Although, Rutgers, got them last year.
Maryland's terrible this year.
Maryland's terrible. Purdue, UCLA. I mean, that should be 6 or 7 wins.
Yeah, yes.
And then you get into maybe your 50-50 games. You beat Michigan last year. You're on the road this year. Michigan's got a freshman quarterback. Illinois, Wisconsin could be tough. I think the Oregons of the world and the Ohio States, I think that's a level up from you. But I do think this is a Washington team that competent O-line play, and your quarterback takes another step, another year under Jed Fish. I do think this can be an 8-9 win team. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
No, and I liked what I saw last year. There were foundational building block pieces, even even among the scraps where you go, oh, that's a tough loss. You go, yeah, I like this player and he's coming back and this player's coming back, and getting Coleman to come back. Williams, I think, is going to break out. Boston's there. They've got a couple of good tight ends. They had a freshman last year. I think it's DeGraff, Decker DeGraff. I might be saying that name wrong, but I really liked him. He was a freshman All-American at tight end, and he might rotate in with another player. I mean, they're deep there. So I like
they got that Quentin Moore, I think, is the other senior tight end coming back.
Quentin Moore.
I was talking to a buddy of mine, and they were pretty happy on at the tight end position. I got some friends that are tied into that program, and let's say it's quiet optimism. I think I think when you come off a bad year like that, I think the doggies are licking their wounds a little bit, but I do think there's quiet optimism up there at Montlake.
I think they win at least 8 games. I really do.
Yeah. All right, now let's go to we talked about it earlier, a team I really do feel bad about, because I just think they got the short end of the stick in this whole realignment thing. And we warned them last year that this thing could spiral and this thing could go bad. And I know they tried to put on a brave face and, oh no, and we're going to be fine. And we're talking about Oregon State, because Oregon State wasn't fine. It was bad. There's just no other way around it. It was bad. 49-14 with Oregon. I guess you did beat Purdue, but you lose to Nevada, you lose to UNLV, you get drilled by Cal. Air Force beats you 28-0. I mean, this was rough stuff.
That Air Force game was the absolute unequivocal low point of their season.
I mean, you got shut out. You got shut out by Air Force.
Yeah.
So if you're Oregon State, I almost feel again a little bit like when we were talking about UW year 1 to year 2 with Fish, and now I think with Trent Bray, I think you can say that same sort of thing. Maybe it's a fresh start. So when we look at Oregon State, kind of a weird schedule, because we still haven't fully emerged from the Pac-2 days. We play Washington State twice, which is beyond weird. You play Washington State in November. The first game in November and the last game in November are both against Washington State. But it's very weird. It's a weird schedule. Everything about this is weird. But when we look at Oregon State and we go strength of the team, do we go Malik Murphy? Is that the most proven commodity? Or maybe do you go to the wide receiver group when you're talking about what you like most about this Beaver offense?
Man, I go a totally different direction. I like Anthony Hankerson a lot.
Yeah. Well,
I think he's really talented. The problem with that, and calling him a strength, because he is good, he's versatile, he's a great back, is it ties into the O-line. And if we're talking question mark, they return, and let's just say, let's just call it what it is. Oregon State's O-line has not been dominant. They've been fine, and they've had years where they've been pretty good. Last year was not a great year for the O-line, and they're replacing 4 starters. They bring back Van Wells. Remember, Van Wells was part of that awful Colorado offense. He was probably the bright spot from it 2 years ago, but he comes to Oregon State and has a pretty good year last year. They're replacing 4 starters. I'm familiar with some of the depth because they're guys that were recruits, and they were potentially guys who could develop and be okay. They're unlikely to have a bunch of standouts. They did bring in a couple of transfer offensive linemen. Took a look at them. I think they're depth pieces. I think they brought in transfers who probably aren't going to start for them, who are older, just so they have 7, 8, 9 bodies. When you start taking in seniors as transfers to just kind of give you a little depth, it's almost like giving you a little hope.
Yeah, it's like JT Hand came in from Arizona, but he right now is not projected to be a starter. And then that one you're talking about is was it Keon Cox, who came in from Central Florida again right now. It is weird that both of them are transfers, and Hand being a senior, and they don't right now appear to be starters.
And if you're Oregon State, don't you because of the risk of losing your freshman and sophomore, wouldn't you rather develop those guys and say, hey, you're going to rotate in, you're going to play? Because if those freshmen and sophomores show promise and you bring in a senior with little upside to come over the top of them, and those freshmen and sophomores do kind of flash, they're going to transfer. So your best method of success is to kind of build up your freshmen and sophomores, let them be backups, let them learn. If you're having to bring in seniors to be backup offensive linemen, you have real concerns. That's what that tells me about that program. You don't bring in multiple seniors transfers to be backups. The wide receiver group, listen, it's local. Beaverton's own Trent Walker and Westview's Darius Clemens.
Walker had a nice year last year. 81 catches,
Walker
and by the way, I thought he'd be gone. So the fact that you were able to keep him, that's a big get.
Walker was one of my sleepers in Oregon when he was at Beaverton. He didn't get recruited very highly. He's just a good football player. Now we're seeing that in Corvallis. He's just a good football player. I think that group lacks explosion. I think your explosion comes from your running game. And again, the reason I can't really call Malik Murphy a strength, in games where he saw pressure, he was awful. And I don't mean, okay. He was awful. He was the 99th rated quarterback in America against pressure, with an O-line in front of him this year that projects to be a weak spot of the team.
This is why Beaver fan hates you. This is why Beaver fan constantly tells you that you're a hater.
I know. The upside with Malik Murphy is if you keep him clean, he's really talented and he would be a strength. But when you pair him with this O-line, I have concerns. If the O-line comes together, I'll say this, if the O-line comes together and you can run the football and you can mix in some play action with Malik Murphy, they could be pretty good. There's a world where they're pretty good, but they need not one, not two, maybe three offensive linemen to break out this fall before I feel good about the O-line. And as you know, it's hard right now to recruit O-line. We've talked about it with Washington. We've talked about it with Oregon State. Oregon has, they have a bag. They have an NIL bag. Yep. They needed 3 O-linemen to get to where they needed to be, or else that was going to be a weakness. When we talk about the NFL, probably when we talk about the Niners and Seahawks, we're going to talk about question marks along the offensive line. That's the modern game in football. And if you're at the bottom of the pecking order or near the bottom of the pecking order in the transfer portal era, you are going to have a hard time with continuity along your offensive line, one of your favorite things, and maintaining good offensive linemen. They're going to leave. So I'm really concerned about the offensive line with Oregon State. I don't mean to beat a dead horse. I will say Malik Murphy's going to have some wonderful games where you go, how in the world could you not see him as a strength? Because they're going to play some opponents where he's going to be kept clean and he's going to throw it all over the yard. There's also going to be some games where they play really good defensive fronts and people go, holy cow, Malik Murphy doesn't know what he's doing. And I think that's the mixed bag you're going to get. That said, they elevated the quarterback play with Malik Murphy. He is good. He was solid at Duke. That's an upgrade over what they've had the past couple of years.
Well, and the thing about the Beavs too that's kind of scary is the schedule is it's rough early. You got Cal that drilled you last year. Fresno State is okay, but I mean that's one of the better group of 5 teams. Texas Tech is gearing up for a run here. They're spending more money than anyone. They think they're a team in the Big 12. And then you play Oregon, which, at this point, the gap's just too great. We know how that game's going to go. It just is, and it's in Eugene. I mean, good luck. That could be a rough start. I don't want that to be the case, but that smells like 1-3, maybe 0-4. And then you get into some more winnable games: App State, Wake Forest, Lafayette, Washington State, Sam Houston, Tulsa. So to Beaver fan, if it starts off rough, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It will free up once you get past Oregon. I think there's more winnable games in the back half, but early on, it may take some wind out of the sails there for the Beavs.
And it's important to note Cal's not Cal, right? It wasn't that long ago that Cal had a depth chart of 5 running backs that they really liked, headlined by Jaden Ott, who's now at Oklahoma. All 5 of them went in the portal. I don't think they all 5 left. I think 1 or 2 of them came back.
But let's also remember that last year it was 44-7 when you played Cal. Just
you know what?
say it.
I think Oregon State might beat Cal.
I hope. I want it. I feel bad for my Beavs.
That's not encouraging, Suk. When I say something like that in this podcast, you can't go, hope.
Look, I want my Beavs to be good. I love my Beavs. Baseball school, go Beavs, College World Series, but I'll believe it. I'll believe it when I see it. I have concerns. I had concerns last year. I have concerns this year, and I'm hoping year 2 under Trent Bray, they're able to stabilize some stuff. So fingers crossed on that one.
To put a pin in Oregon State.
Yeah.
If they're better than Washington State and they beat Washington State twice, we will probably look back and call this a successful season.
Absolutely.
If they split with Washington State, it depends. It's going to be a wild card season. If they go 0-2 against Washington State, this season will be viewed as a failure.
They need to start laying some foundation because when the new Pac-10 launches, that's going to be the toughest of the group of 5, or I guess now I think technically it might be the group of 6, right? With Mountain West and Pac-12, whatever, the non-power 4s. And you need to start laying some foundation, because that is going to be a tough league. There are going to be good teams in that, starting with Boise State, and you mentioned Washington State, and there's some solid teams in there, and you've got to start laying the foundation now for Oregon State to stop comparing yourself to the Oregons or the Big Ten schools, and just being like, hey, our goal is going to be to win that conference every year. And what we saw last year is nowhere near where you're going to need to be in order to win the new Pac-12 and to compete with the Boise States of the world. So I don't need 9 wins, but I need to see progress, and I need the stability and proof that Trent Bray is the guy down in Corvallis. Switch gears. Let's move over to the NFL. So we'll start with Seattle, and then we'll move down to the 49ers. Because I know you are a diehard 49er fan, but I do want to touch upon the Seahawks here, because the Seahawks right now, it seems like just 9 wins, game short of the playoffs, rinse and repeat. Doesn't matter who the coach is. So year 2, brand new coach with Mike McDonald coming in last year. And again, we saw a lot of the same things. Some good, some bad, game short of the playoffs, get there and, basically get down to the last game of the year. And it didn't really matter because you needed some help from someone else. Didn't happen. And another year missing the playoffs. Is this the year that Seattle can finally take the step? But when you look at the offense, arguably your best receiver is gone. Quarterback that I really liked a lot in Geno Smith is gone. And you're bringing in Sam Darnold, which before last year, Sam Darnold was viewed as an absolute waste. And do you finally have an answer along an offensive line that has been bad for the last seemingly 10 years? So when you look at this Seahawks offense, and we believe the Seahawks defense, again, probably be the strength of the team, but when you look at the Seahawks offense, do you believe that this is an offense that can actually get them back to the postseason?
It's going to be really tough. You look at a team that replaces, long-time franchise guys, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Yeah. They had Noah Fant. They released him within the last week. Your whole group of receivers is gone. I love Jackson Smith-Njigba. I had him as my number 1 receiver in that draft a couple years ago. I think he's due for a breakout season. I think Cooper Kupp is going to do some of the underneath stuff that frees up Smith-Njigba to be a star. I love that. I think releasing Noah Fant means that Elijah Arroyo, their one of their early picks
out of Miami,
has a chance to be really special. Great tight end. He dealt with some injuries, and I know their GM John Schneider said that had he not been hurt, that they thought he had potential to be a top 15 pick. I think that's lofty. I've watched Elijah Arroyo. I really like him. I'll say this: I've watched Mario Cristobal offenses up close and personal for a number of years. If a tight end emerges from his offense if a tight end emerges from his offense and is anything other than just a really good blocker, and there's enough film to go, this dude's got potential. It probably means he's only scratched the surface of what he's capable of. So releasing Noah Fant kind of got my fantasy football ears going in terms of Elijah Arroyo as a possible sleeper. I like him a lot. I love the running back duo, Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And then we get into the real crux of this offense. I strongly believe that Geno Smith is probably a second-tier quarterback in the league. I think he's a top 12-ish quarterback in the NFL. The problem last year was, and it has been for the last little bit here for the Seahawks, their bookend tackles they took a couple years ago, Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas, they flashed as rookies, and they've kind of dealt with injuries and inconsistencies since. And I think people saw them as rookies and go, we got our bookend tackles in one draft. This is great. And since then, it's been very meh. The interior's been terrible. And Geno in the passing game kind of took a step back because that interior is bad. Now, Charles Cross and Lucas are back. So you go, okay, if they're healthy, we feel okay about our tackles. The interior was a mess. They drafted Gray Zabel. When we talk about the board going the Seahawks way, and by the way, I've loved the last 3 Seahawks drafts, the fact that Gray Zabel is just sitting there as the franchise answer. What do you need? You need an upgrade at both guard spots and center. Yeah. Let's take Gray Zabel, who might be the best guard at left guard, right guard, and he's by the way the best center in this draft. He'll play left guard for the Seahawks. If the offensive line is good, I think Sam Darnold can do what he did with the Vikings, where he's just throwing to good receivers, and Jackson Smith and Jigba has a career year. And the run game kind of follows with the Walker Charbonnet 1-2 punch. But if that O-line doesn't come together and 6 cents Sam Darnold starts seeing ghosts again, it could get really ugly really quickly. Now, I still really like Smith and Jigba. This feels like a team that believes they have 5 or 6 pieces in place for the future offense for next year or the year after. They like Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet as their 1-2. They really like Jackson Smith and Jigba. They're already pretty excited about Elijah Arroyo. Gray Zabel is going to be a franchise staple on the offensive line. And it kind of feels like everything else is almost a short-term tryout to see if this is what they really want to roll out with Clint Kubiak, or if they're going to have to do another reset. I think this is a team that misses the playoffs because I just have no faith in Sam Darnold against the blitz. And I do think this O-line's going to give up pressure.
Well, and Darnold's one of the worst quarterbacks against pressure. He just is.
Oh, he's awful.
And so that's why I did
ghosts. He sees ghosts, Suk.
I like Geno Smith more than others. And I'm not saying that Geno is the end all, the be all, but Geno Smith was not the problem with this team. And I thought it was weird. I know I guess they tried to re-sign him, but when you look at the money between Darnold and Geno, it's not much different. I know you get a draft pick out of it, but I don't know. I just think it's a weird lateral move for someone that and Sam Darnold has never looked like a real quarterback unless he was playing with what I think is a top 3 or 4 offensive mind in football with one of the best skill sets around him in Minnesota. So,
but Suk, isn't that move essentially an admission that, hey, we know we probably can't get to the top of the mountain the way we like to build a team with Geno. So let's get cheap on a tryout run with Darnold.
Darnold's not much cheaper.
If Darnold can be a top 10 quarterback, and by the way, Geno reportedly wanted a raise, right? He wanted a bump. If Darnold can be a top 10 quarterback on his current contract, you have money to spend elsewhere to upgrade your O-line. If that recipe works. If it doesn't, it's really easy to pivot from that Darnold deal and say, okay, we weren't very good. We won 6 games this year. We won 7 games this year. Next year's draft is loaded with quarterbacks. Yeah. We'll go get our future guy next year, especially now that we have some draft capital to move around. And in this year where we're kind of trying pieces out and feeling things out, we're going to have Jackson Smith and Jigba take a step up. Elijah Arroyo is going to emerge. We have Gray Zabel in the interior. So we're going to put a young quarterback, if Darnold doesn't work out, in a mature, healthy situation.
I just didn't love when you look at the contracts there. To me, outside of the draft pick, that you got the 1 pick from the in the Geno thing, the Sam Darnold and Geno, the contract really wasn't much different. So maybe ultimately, again, you just have more faith in Sam Darnold, or there was a few dollars in saving. I like what I've seen from Geno Smith for a couple years as opposed to Sam Darnold. But I guess what you saw in Sam Darnold last year for the hunk of the year in Minnesota was better than what we saw in Geno, but Geno wasn't playing in that Minnesota offense. And I guess bringing in Kubiak too. Look, Kubiak is going to play action the hell out of this thing. This is going to be run the ball, play action, limit the Sam Darnold mistakes. And maybe that's the key to this whole thing too, is that Geno wanted to stand back there and sling the ball downfield a bunch. And I think Geno throws the ball downfield better than a lot of people in the NFL. And I'm guessing with Sam Darnold, this is going to be more of we're picking our spots to throw it downfield. Kubiak his whole idea is that outside zone run scheme, and then we're working the play action off of that. So maybe the idea is, again, just to protect Sam Darnold through that. But it's going to be interesting to see, year 2. And it feels like Seattle is never bad. Seattle is just never really good. So year 2 under Mike McDonald, maybe the defense takes a giant step up. Maybe Sam Darnold, if Sam Darnold, he led him to 13, 14 wins last year in Minnesota. So, here we are. I'm kind of poo-pooing Sam Darnold when he's coming off a great year in Minnesota. So maybe this is just some Geno love on my part. I just think this Seattle offense to me will be one of the more interesting groups, certainly on the West Coast. And I think in all of the NFL, because I think it is kind of a bit of a grand experiment.
Can I give you a sleeper?
Yeah, give me a sleeper.
Okay. So last year during the draft, I picked out 2 guards in the middle rounds that I really liked. I was doing evaluation. See, people don't know we're going to get into draft chatter way more than we should. My 2 guards that I really liked were Christian Haynes out of UConn and Dominic Pooney out of Kansas. I love both those guys.
And we know what happened with Pooney. He became one of the best guards in the NFL.
But the question was, and you're right, absolutely. The question was, what scheme would they be in? Because Pooney went to the Niners and it worked perfectly. It was what he needed. Haynes went to a gap scheme last year.
Yeah.
That's not what he was.
No.
He was an outside zone kind of blocking guard, and he kind of struggled. In fact, I think he underwhelmed Seahawks fans who thought they maybe had a steal.
Absolutely.
Don't sleep on the possibility that in a Kubiak system that finally fits what a Christian Haynes can do, if he doesn't take a step up. And if he does, and I'm not saying he will, but if he does, and you suddenly have Zabel and Haynes and you get some healthy play at tackle, this O-line could look a lot better. Okay. I think there's a real possibility we see Haynes finally kind of take that step in year 2 that people went, where is this guy? We thought he was supposed to be a prospect. What happened? He was in the total wrong fit. Now he's in the perfect right fit. And I do think we could see him elevate if he gains the trust of the coaching staff. And we could be looking at a guy who suddenly delivers on that promise and elevates that O-line.
All right. Something to keep an eye on there. And then we're going here. If you don't know, Nemec is a giant 49er nerd. And I will call you out because there was a quarterback years and years ago that you loved.
I still have my Trey Lance coffee mug.
And his name was not Brock Purdy. Yes.
No, wait a minute. I've got a story about that. That's not fair. I had a whole segment on my radio show when Brock Purdy was in high school.
Yeah.
That Brock Purdy was the sleeper prospect in the entire country for quarterback. That's
really?
True. Absolutely. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year in Arizona. Arizona plays really competitive, really good football. And there was a couple of quarterbacks coming out at that time who were really, really good. And Purdy was better statistically than all of them. So I'm like, I'm going to go watch his senior film. And he popped. And right at that time, Oregon State offered him. So then I got really interested because then it had a local tie, right?
Sure.
So I start really watching him. I get in contact with him. I interview him. And I'm like, this is my guy. So I did a whole segment on recruiting with Andrew Nemec that was Brock Purdy is the sleeper that Oregon State needs. And he got an offer from Alabama. He got an offer from, I think it was Texas A&M as well. And they offered him as like a clipboard holder. Like, this kid won't transfer. He's good enough to be our third guy forever, whatever. So they threw out really late offers to him. Oregon State got spooked off by the Alabama offer, and he was supposed to visit. He ends up not visiting. And I think, according to his camp, that was an Oregon State thing. They kind of went, hey, you've kind of elevated beyond us. Well, Alabama and Texas A&M offered multiple guys. So they go get their 3-star clipboard holder guy. Brock Purdy's only other school that recruited him the whole way through, Oregon State and Iowa State. He goes to Iowa State and becomes a second-team freshman All-American behind Trevor Lawrence. The only freshman quarterback to have a better freshman year was Trevor Lawrence. So that became a recurring talking point on my show because Oregon State started to have problems at quarterback. And I said, where would Oregon State be if they had just continued to pursue Brock Purdy instead of getting spooked off by Alabama? So, yes, I liked Trey Lance, but I actually liked Brock Purdy first.
All right. I like it. There's the caveat there. I just love to give you crap over.
Oh, you should. It's a terrible.
Love.
I loved Trey Lance. I'm
but
an
you
idiot.
Stumbled into Brock Purdy. And again, much like Gino, I don't think Brock Purdy gets the love and respect. Brock Purdy is not a system quarterback. Brock Purdy is a really, really good quarterback. So we look at the Niner offense again. Last year, utter disaster. But I mean, my God, right? Like your best receiver tears an ACL. Your rookie receiver gets shot. Your other receiver decides to get fat. Everyone on the offense and defense gets hurt. I mean, it's an unmitigated disaster. It feels like every other year the 49ers go from Super Bowl contender to most injured team in the NFL. So if we're following the history of this, it should be a healthy year, and the 49ers are going to be back and be one of the most dangerous teams in the NFL. But when you look at the offense, no Debo. They moved on from that. I look at a lot of the guys that I think the 49ers lost, and people are going to be, even on the defensive side of the ball, oh my God, they lost all these guys. But none of those guys played. Nope. They weren't real contributors. So when I look at the offense, again, maybe this just comes down to, can they stay healthy? But if they stay healthy, I look at this group and I say, why not? Why can't the 49ers be back to where they were a couple years ago? Just 2 years ago, when you're knocking on the door of a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think you look at the wide receiver core, and that's where the real question comes from, right? Because you traded away Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk's probably going to start the year on PUP and may not play till like a week 8.
Yeah.
Ricky Pearsall's out with a hamstring already. Jawan Jennings, who almost had 1,000 yards, except he got thrown out of a game in the last week of the season. He might hold out and wants a contract. You've got George Kittle, a versatile weapon, but he's often hurt. It's an off and on thing. He's the Christian McCaffrey of tight ends, right? Really special, but often hurt. You've got Christian McCaffrey, who, when he plays, is your fantasy number 1, number 2, number 3 overall pick. When he doesn't, he really doesn't. I mean, he misses long stretches of time. So it all comes back to like, it's the same thing over and over, except they're starting the year with Jawan Jennings wanting a hold, or potentially wanting to hold out. Brandon Ayuk already hurt. Ricky Pearsall already hurt. And when they released their non-football injury list, Ben Barch, their left guard, who was supposed to replace Aaron Banks, is already on the list. Yeah. And if he's hurt for a long period of time, that's a huge problem. And we'll get into the defense and all the holes in the defense, but there were some holes along that offensive line last year too. And, injuries really made things worse, but they have Trent Williams, Dominique Booney emerged. They've got Colton McKivitz at right tackle, but that interior is a huge question mark. And they chose basically not to address it this offseason at all, and instead take as many swings as possible to fix this awful run defense. Yep. So they can't really afford a lot of injuries, especially on the interior. And now, arguably, their best guard, although I know Pooney had a great year, those two guys were pretty good. Ben Barch was, I think, in PFF, a top 25 guard in the NFL. You start 2 of them, so that's pretty good. If he's hurt, you've already got some issues. Jake Brendel, I know John Lynch came out and said, he had a great year. He didn't. He was a problem last year. He was an issue. They just chose not to address it. So you look at the Seahawks draft, and there is a part of me that kind of wishes the Niners could have traded down, and they could have got a little of the Gray Zabel juice, because I think that's going to really help. I just have questions about, it comes down to injuries, and I've got real questions about this O-line again, because they had issues last year, and they went, let's run it back. And you go, man, you probably should have signed a free agent or 2. And the fact that you didn't means that you're kind of willing to let the Shanna plan work around it. And if there's injuries, he has a hard time doing that. He's shown he has a hard time doing it.
Yeah. Well, and they basically even said it. Well, one, they said they had to rebuild the defense. I mean, you look at their draft, clearly they were addressing the defense. And the second one is they said they kind of had to get the books right. This was definitely a shed some salary and put yourself in a better position. And you're going to have to rely on some youth and hopefully some health. But this was kind of a turning of the page, a shedding of the skin. And honestly, this is what good teams do, though. Even though sometimes it's a step back to take a step forward. And ultimately, Brock Purdy is going to have to shoulder more of the load. Look, when you get that contract, there's 2 ways to do this in the NFL, right? We know the easiest way to do it is on the rookie scale quarterback. When you have a rookie scale quarterback, you can pay the rest of the roster. But once you start making 50+ million a year, it's time for you to start filling in some of the holes. The quarterback play has to fill in the holes. And so I think that's Brock Purdy. I think Brock Purdy is so much better than anyone gives him credit for. I thought Brock Purdy was better last year than people gave him credit for. We did have to fill in all those holes.
He was very good last year, yeah.
But now with the and I think if he was a first-round quarterback, we talk about him completely different. But I think there's draft bias when we talk about quarterback play, depending on where you're drafted. But I mean, ultimately, Christian McCaffrey staying healthy and Brock Purdy elevating and really establishing himself as a top 10 quarterback that can't be debated. I mean, maybe it's just as simple as that. If you're looking at this 49er offense,
I just think we talk about the quarterback position wrong. And I think everyone does it. We do this top, and it's not your fault. Everyone does this thing. They do like, is he a top 5? Is he a top 10? I think we need to tier it. I think there are tiers, and there's clearly a second tier. And by the way, I think Geno Smith is in this tier. It's tier 1 is guys who can win you a Super Bowl even when you have holes. And that's your Lamar Jacksons, that's your Joe Burrow, it's your Patrick Mahomes.
It's a rarefied air.
It's rarefied air. I think tier 2 is bigger than we give people credit for. And I have a good team, and I can win with this team. And I think that tier is really big. And we've seen that it's really big. There's been years where a Jared Goff by week 14, we're talking about, is he the MVP of the league? Well, talent-wise, he's not in tier 1. And by the way, even in those years, and this is how I know the tier system's right, no one ever goes, yeah, but Jared Goff's better than Mahomes. It's like, no, we've established these tiers, but there can be a lot of movement in those tiers. So Goff is in that. Herbert's in that. Purdy's in that. Stafford's in that. Geno Smith is in that. It's a big group of guys where, hey, everything's going right. You're probably having a career year. Your very best year, you even flirt with people kind of talking about you being an MVP. People forget they did that with Purdy too 2 years ago. It's like, man, maybe he's the MVP. It's that guy that really elevates, and no one actually ever says, oh, he's better than Mahomes. He's better than Joe Burrow. No, he's better than Lamar Jackson. We never get to that level because it's a tier system. But he's good enough to elevate to the top of tier 2. Purdy is firmly in tier 2. When things are good, he can be a guy that wins you a Super Bowl. When things are bad, he is not so good that you go, let's just rely on Purdy and take this thing to the promised land. That's not who he is. And that's okay because that guy is 3 or 4 guys. Dak Prescott, tier 2. And once you start tiering it like that, it kind of makes sense. You kind of go, oh, okay, so there's fluidity and we don't have to put a number on it, that he's the number 7, that he's the number 12, that he's the number 6, because that's really, really fluid. But if we go by tier, Brock Purdy's tier 2. He's never going to be tier 1. He doesn't have those tools. But tier 2 can be anywhere from the 5th best quarterback to probably the 13th best quarterback in the league. And I think depending on the year, depending on the health of his team, that's firmly where Brock Purdy is, and that's plenty fine in a Kyle Shanahan offense.
Yeah. Jalen Hurts just won a Super Bowl in dominant fashion, and Jalen Hurts is not in tier 1.
Tier 2.
He's just not. He just, but he plays with maybe right now the best GM in football and the best roster in football. And when he plays in that system and his talents are allowed to flourish, all of a sudden you go to the Super Bowl and you end up, dominating the Kansas City Chiefs. He's had 2 Super Bowl games where he's been absolutely phenomenal. But if you watch him in the regular season, Jalen Hurts is not Josh Allen. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's certainly not Patrick Mahomes. But again, for the Philadelphia Eagles, he's good enough. But you have to put a team around him.
Yeah.
You do.
Josh Allen, by the way, in tier 1 as well. He's the one. Yes. The one I left out. The one question I have for you, and this is kind of reverting back to Seahawks. We talk about the potential downgrade. I do, when you put it into tiers, I do think that Geno Smith is a tier 2 guy.
I do.
And I firmly think Sam Darnold's a tier 3 guy. In everything has to go right. And if you put him in the right system, he can be successful, but you're risking a lot that he could deteriorate. I think Darnold's a tier 3 guy. I do. And I'm wondering, you can have big seasons again in tier 3 where everything went right for you. You had great receivers, great O-line, and you could look like a borderline Pro Bowler. But no one would call you a top 6 quarterback in the league, a top 8 quarterback in the league. Again, it's that whole thing with you can't quite jump up into the upper echelon of the other tier no matter how good you are, because we kind of know, even though we pretend we don't. I think even if Darnold has a good year this year for the Seahawks, we will still say he's not in tier 2. Is that crazy?
It's a good question. He had as good a year as you could have if you're Sam Darnold with Minnesota. And Minnesota chose to move on from him. I think that probably speaks volumes. And like I said, when I look at coaching staffs and I look at play callers and you look at what's happening in Minnesota, how many would you take just from an offensive standpoint, right? How many would you take around the league over what's happening in Minnesota?
Maybe early season, fully healthy Tampa Bay. Great O-line, Bucky Irving, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. That might be it.
Yeah. There's so much to like. And he was playing in a perfect situation for him with a guy that is a proven quarterback whisperer. And they had tremendous success. I think they won 13 games, if I'm not mistaken. Because they remember that was the last week, basically they were playing Detroit for a bye week.
For the 1 seed,
For the 1 seed. So I just want to pull this up, but I believe it was a 13 win season for them. And ultimately that coaching staff decided to move on. So yes, if Darnold has another great year, I just think he's going to have a really hard time shaking that. You're going to have to do that year after year after year after year after year, because when Kevin O'Connell looks at you and says, hey man, we took you to all these heights and you won us all these games, but I'm going to rely on JJ McCarthy. To me, that speaks volumes, because he's forgotten more about football than I'll ever know and sees that up close and personal. And again, not many guys, maybe 3 or 4 that I would take to mentor my young quarterback over him. I mean, you're talking about the McVays, and if you want to go down the Sean Paytons and Andy Reid's, obviously, but Matt LaFleur
and Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin O'Connell is one of the brightest minds in football. Absolutely. And the fact that he didn't want Sam Darnold and he's going with JJ McCarthy, I can't get that out of the back of my mind. But
right,
he's going to be in Seattle, and we'll see what happens. Again, this isn't, I'm with you. I don't think he'll ever be elevated. Can he be the fit? Can he be the Brad Johnson for the Seattle Seahawks? Because that team is going to be built on playing defense, running the ball, play action pass, and don't screw it up. Can you be the guy that's good enough? I think that is what's happened in Seattle. And in Brock Purdy, I don't think the 49ers have that ability. I think Brock has to be better than that. And Brock is better than that. Brock has proven that he's better than that. But I think those two quarterback situations are clearly different. Anyone that tells you that Brock Purdy is anywhere near the level of Geno Smith or Sam Darnold, you're just not watching football. Brock Purdy is just better than that. Plain and simple, end of story.
Yeah, I think Brock Purdy really is, I mean, in that upper echelon of tier 2, even when things weren't good last year. And by the way, things were a disaster. They were on their 3rd and 4th running back. They were on their 3rd and 4th receiver. They were on their 2nd tight end, multiple O-linemen banged up. Very few people went, man, this Niner offense can't move the football. I mean, he's still a good quarterback in that situation with pressure in his face constantly. Yeah. Brock Purdy's really good. I saw a really cool thing. We've seen this mostly in basketball, where they kind of gray out the player, or they make it really pixelated, and you have to see from the moves.
Yeah, I know. I've seen this. Yep.
Okay, so they did it with Brock Purdy, and people were guessing Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers. Like, there were all these guesses of who it was, and it was Brock Purdy. And again, that speaks to your point that he was a 7th round pick and he has great weapons around him, so he can't be that guy. But if you take that out and just kind of pixelate it, the way he plays, the way he manipulates the pocket, the way he finds space, the way he throws receivers open, all of that stuff is teetering at times on elite. It just is. Yeah. And I think, again, I get tired of that whole, is he top 8? Well, yeah, he's top 8 when, his guys are healthy, relatively healthy. He might be 9th when everyone's hurt. Okay. I mean, that doesn't bother me. He's a solid tier 2 quarterback. If things go well for the team, he can win you a Super Bowl and you're not worried about your quarterback spot. That's where he is. And we'll see if the Niners, defense, we'll see if the Niners offense can stay healthy, if they can actually compete at that level again. Like you said, it's an every other year thing. So this is another one of those years where they should get close to the promised land.
All right. Well, that'll do it for episode 1. We touched on all the big offenses here on the West Coast. We got your 3 college. We hit a couple NFL stuff. So it was a lot of fun. The time absolutely flew by. I think we were actually trying to keep this to like a tight 45. I think we blew right by that, but this is what we do. We start talking football. Got a couple of football junkies. So we're going to try to do this Mondays and Fridays, at least for now. So join us on Friday. We'll hopefully put that out Friday, or maybe we get it out Saturday, but we're going to record it on Friday, and we're going to do this all over again, but let's do the defensive side of the ball. So Nemec, enjoy it. And thank you for whoever tuned in. Again, hopefully this is just the first of many of these. So again, click subscribe, all that fun stuff. Find us, and we'll hopefully keep trying to put out good content for you guys. So we'll see you guys on Friday.
Thanks.
There you go, buddy.